I break it down into there's two different organizations. There's the United States of America, which is a body politic.
Hmm.
It's the union of the states. And then there is the federal government, which is a body corporate.
Hmm.
So the federal government they are a state. They're not a union, they're not part of the union, but they are a state. They have a capital, they have ministers and that sort of stuff, which is actually a secondary duty of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the president works as the mayor or the governor of D.C. And there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people around the world that have benefited from his understanding of this thing. And like I say, the big thing that I got out of it was you got to read this stuff every day, every day, every day, every day.
Right. And that's what's been nice about our weekly breakfast junto gathering group, uh, is it reminds me of a lot of things, and everybody's always so excited to be there and to share their thoughts and what they've been experiencing, and people who think about what they're thinking about
Right.
are fun to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And it was remarked during the Jordan Peterson lecture that I went to down in Boise this last spring, where he talked about Aristotle, or who was the one who was forced to drink poison?
Um, wasn't Aristotle. It was.
I have no idea why I space that right now.
Yeah.
But he was forced to drink poison in Greece, and he was one of the founding fathers of like the Stoic tradition and
Right.
Greek philosophy and all of that. And apparently, there's no real record in the Western tradition that other people were thinking about what they were thinking about. He was the one. Socrates.
Socrates. Yeah, that's what it was.
And that's why we still have the Socratic method for science, is where we're thinking about what we're thinking about.
Right.
And one of the ways to prove what we're doing is to find all of the things that disprove what we're thinking.
Yeah.
What our theories are. But apparently in the Western world, before Socrates, there was no record that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
There may have been folks here and there, but it wasn't really talked about.
Right.
And now we just take it as a norm, and that was a huge jump for Western culture, was why are we thinking what we're thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And what it is using the imagination, doing the essence of philosophy, which is using the mind to solve problems in the non-material world that then manifests a solution in the material world.
Right.
Where we can run through these scenarios in our head,
mm-hmm.
and work them out that way, and then apply them and see how they actually work.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Antikythera mechanism?
Yeah, it was like the first computer. It was the first computer type of deal. Because it was like a sphere that could calculate for navigation, right?
Yeah, that's what it was. It was a really early form of a clock.
Mm-hmm.
Now it didn't tell time by the day or by the minute or anything like that, but it told times because they figured out that every 19 years is a cycle of moon eclipses, sun eclipses, that sort of thing. They cycle every 19 years. And based on that, they were able to figure out a gear train that they put together that everything, whenever you turned the knob on it, everything moved in according with this 19-year cycle. So if you were out on a ship and you had one of these events, a solar eclipse or a moon eclipse, or something in the stars lined up, and you turned the knob to that alignment,
Right.
you could tell exactly where you were around the world because they knew how far it was
Right.
around the world. And it was the earliest form of a clock until clocks were made mid 1700s or something. Somebody from England, I think, made the first clock that registered in minutes and days and that sort of thing. And that was used in navigation because again, they knew how fast the world was turning. It turns one
Right.
revolution every 24 hours.
Because that was just to do one more word for a degree, right? Was one in just the minutes. I think it's still used in just the navigation.
Right, yeah.
Is all of the
Yeah.
minutes.
Right. Yeah, there's 360 degrees in a circle.
Right. And I think that's why they use the term the minutes of the meeting, because it just delineate where they are in the
Right.
meeting, which
Right.
is typically an hour.
Right, right, and the minutes of the meeting tell anybody that looks at the minutes what was discussed and what was
When.
decided and when it was decided and that
Right.
sort of thing. Who voted for it, who voted against it, that sort of thing.
Right. All of the orientations you need, all of the minutes,
Right.
which is how you just orient
Right.
yourself. All
Yeah,
of the things that
and it's in everything, especially in law, because the order is there has to be an act of Congress if it's going to affect everyone in the country. There's going to have to be an act of Congress, and if it only affects some people, then there's these executive orders. Well, the executive orders only apply to people that work for the federal government. It doesn't apply to anybody else.
Right. And that's where some folks get confused about what is just federal law and what are the federal states. They think it's all the states that are in the Federation of the United States.
Yeah, and that's not so.
Right. It's all of the federal states, which is D.C. and Puerto Rico, Guam, maybe Marshall Islands.
Yeah, there's some of the Virgin Islands that are U.S. territories and that stuff too. And you can see that if you look back in history. Prior to 1959, the term United States includes, it either includes or it's automatically excluded. So the term United States means or includes Guam, Washington D.C., Guam, Samoa, Puerto Rico, Alaska, and Hawaii, and then Alaska became a state, and for
Hawaii.
a number of months, the documents then said United States includes Washington D.C., Guam, Samoa, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii, and left out Alaska because Alaska became a state, and then after that it leaves out Hawaii because Hawaii became a state. But it doesn't refer to the if it refers if the Congress wants you to understand that it refers to the 50 states, they'll say includes the 50 states or the several states or the union states.
Right.
But if it doesn't have any of those three words in it, then it only includes Washington D.C., only the federal states.
Right. Right. Which is where the executive has authority.
Right.
Which is well, that's one of the things that I really loved about the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by uh, Gibbon was he explained that the because when I at least and how I always thought of it and would read it was the emperor is like a king of kings. He's not just a king where he like sort of run things. He has complete authority over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. It is the emperor, the imperator. He had the executive powers of the federal state. So he was in charge of the armed forces, which would defend the empire,
Mm-hmm.
and the borders of the empire,
Mm-hmm.
which is where he had the authority, not within the state itself. He was just tasked with, okay, you are the guy who makes the decisions involving all of the borders and the armed forces.
Mm-hmm.
That's your sphere. It is at the edge and out,
Right.
not from the edge from the edges in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same way our system works, is where that's why when just the president says a thing, if just the governors say, well, we don't like that and we don't agree with that, so we're not going to enforce it or make it law here. Tough.
Right. Yeah.
Tough.
Sure.
Because that's not where you have authority. Whereas if you're part of our party and we're doing this as just a national thing, half of the states will go along with what it is you're saying. But beyond that, no.
Right. And if the state wants to go along with it, the state has to pass its own law.
To agree with it.
Yeah, to agree with it.
Right. Right. And when people start to confuse those terms, I saw it with a Harvard or Stanford professor where she began using constitutional law interchangeably with federal law.
Oh boy.
And I was like, I got a half hour into her lecture before I shut it off, because I would rather be unaware than learn bad information, because if you can't even use those words right,
Yeah.
I don't trust a damn word you're saying, because she
Right.
said explicitly, oh, they are the same thing. No, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not at all.
No, that's not how this functions.
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me, but that's not the way this works.
Yeah.
And so when you even have professors teaching lawyers at just an Ivy League, I'm pretty sure it was Harvard. It's like, I would absolutely love to have the sense of mind of being able to trust in our appointed and elected experts.
Right.
But not when I hear stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
oh, it's a
yeah.
blind
They're
leading the
obviously,
blind.
yeah. They don't have a clue.
Right. So just to be clear, how would you define the distinctions between those two? Because the Constitution is a federal law in that it affects the Federation, but it's not.
Yeah, I break it down into, there's two different organizations. There's the United States of America, which is a body politic.
Mm-hmm.
It's the union of the states. And then there is the federal government, which is a body corporate.
Mm-hmm.
So the federal government has, they are a state. They're not a union, they're not part of a union, but they are a state. They have a capital, they have ministers and that sort of stuff, which is actually a secondary duty of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the president works as the mayor or the governor of D.C. So whenever they're
but they do have a different mayor of the city. But then there's
right,
the district.
Right. Yeah, he's the governor. He's not the mayor.
Right.
So they have all of that, and that's why in 1874, they bifurcated the two. They created the District of Columbia as a separate entity
Right.
that is subject to that. So they were allowed to, according to that, have a standing army. There's no provision for a standing army in the national law,
Right.
because we have the militia, which is every able-bodied man between the ages of 19 and 45 or something like that. That is the militia, and the militia protects the citizens of the state from invasion from other governments, other countries, and also they prevent insurrection within the state. And that's a totally different thing than the United States Army. The United States Army is the army of the District of Columbia,
Right.
and it has promoted wars all around the world
Right.
because it funds the military-industrial complex.
Right. Well, again, that's one of the issues, because we talked about it on, I believe, the previous podcast, which is you talked in there was a Supreme Court decision in the 60s where a citizen is presumed to know the law. So if he does things that are not lawful or just at the say-so of an officer of the state, then that's on him because he has the duty.
Right. Yeah. The actual terminology is every person is presumed to know the law. And we know that
Right.
corporations are considered to be persons. They're not people,
Right.
but they are persons.
Right.
So every person is presumed to know the law. Well, that's not only people in government, but it's on to the citizens and everything like that. And anybody who acts under an unconstitutional statute does so at his own peril,
Right.
and he must take the consequences.
Right.
So there's some really interesting things going on here right now with all these suits against former President Trump. And the different maneuvers that these attorneys make, and I'm going, my God, you don't see the hole in that whole philosophy.
Or they don't care.
Oh, right.
Well, that's one of those things too. It's where either they don't know and don't care, or they do know and don't care.
Right.
And Joe Biden and Obama and Bush have all said, well, we don't think this will be constitutional, and we think it'll be struck down by the Supreme Court, but we're still going to make this executive order.
Right.
And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And see that I brought this up because there's a thing I keep going back to in my mind when it comes to the law and people knowing the law, is where my Marine Corps retired sister, during the riots of 2020, sent me I think it was in Washington Post or New York Times. It was an open letter sent by retired Marine Corps General Mad Dog Mattis, who had been fired by Trump, who had originally hired him as like the Secretary of Defense or something like this. And Mathis, yeah, that's what's his name, Mathis, not Mattis, Mathis, penned an open letter to Trump in the newspaper saying Trump's deployment of the federal forces to quell the riots was just like Putin's frogmen, little green men, shock troops, stormtroopers. That he was all trying to align that with Trump being a dictator, with being dictator because of Trump's actions or proposed ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like when there was that Chaz or Chop out in Seattle where they said, oh, these square blocks are a separate state. and
okay.
all of that. Trump was saying, well, you know, if the mayor or it's just the governor won't take care of that, we'll send in the federal troops.
Right.
Well, that was within his purview because they had established themselves as a sovereign territory,
Right.
which then makes it a federal issue,
Right.
especially if the state can't take care of it.
Right.
If the state can't do it, then the feds have the authority to step in and say, okay, well, they're saying they're a sovereign territory, just like
Right.
just an Indian tribe
and
or
it wasn't
anything.
even the idea that they claimed that they were a sovereign territory. They just didn't follow the rules of law to create a sovereign territory
Right,
lawfully. They just, oh, yeah, we're just going to go do it, you know.
right.
Uh,
And then there were the attacks too on the Supreme Court house in Portland, and or it was not it was a U.S. Supreme Court house, or a federal Supreme Court. It was
Well-
some sort of just a federal court.
yeah,
That-
it
that-
might
that-
have been
that was in Portland. It
yeah,
was a federal
U.S.
courthouse.
district, yeah, U.S. district court for
Right.
the district of Oregon, first, second, third, fourth, fifth
Sorry.
district of Oregon.
Right. And Trump was using federal troops to protect it because the city and state
It's a U.S.
could not-
courthouse.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a
And-
state courthouse. It's
Right.
U.S.
Right. And he had also deployed troops to quell the riots when the church across the street from the White House got burned down. He deployed federal troops. And Mathis was saying he was acting like Putin with his little green men, shock troop, stormtroopers, whatever.
Yeah.
And my sister shared that with me to like try to show me, oh, look at how terrible things are going that they're deploying federal troops on American soil. And I wrote her back and I said, Mathis is either stupid, which I really hope not, because he was in charge of the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
or he's willfully lying because federal troops were not deployed on American soil. They
Yeah.
were deployed on federal soil,
Right.
protecting federal property.
Right.
Trump can do that.
hmm
What's the issue here? That's well within the law.
Right.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I still don't like what he did.
There's
Okay.
the real reason.
Okay, then say that, and you can go, you know what? I don't like it, but it's lawful. You can
Right.
absolutely do that. But to then say, well, I think it should have been unlawful, and I think it should be used against him just because I don't like it. Okay, well, then that just makes you emotional and stupid.
Right.
And now it's worse because now you know the law, you didn't dispute it with me, and you're still okay with it.
hmm
So you're an insurrectionist. You are anti-American law,
Right.
and you still have the oath of being in the Marines to uphold the Constitution,
Yeah.
and now you're okay with
Right,
with
yeah.
ignoring and subverting it.
Right,
What,
yeah.
What? And she has no idea why we don't get along very well.
Yeah.
It's like we clearly have different values here.
Right. Yep.
I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah.
So, cool, man. Well,
Yeah.
I think that was a really good conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
And perhaps tomorrow we'll do one more.
Yeah.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right, Cliff. Thank you, man.
Yep.